Okay, so Boker Tov, good morning, Shavua Tov to everyone, and thank you for coming here, making the long journey from the shul here. You see how difficult my life are.
Parking is the problem.
Parking. Okay. So today we will try to speak, to learn about one of the most important, prominent rabbis of the 18th century, and that is Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, also known as the Ramchal. And he lived for less than 40 years. Nonetheless, his productivity can easily fill the lifetime of more than 2 or 3 people living to 120. So he wrote more than 40 books that remained, and it seems that at least 40 books that were lost in unfortunate circumstances, about which we will, Bezrat Hashem, speak. Now, just to show his importance, if you look at the first source on your source sheet, that's from Rav David Cohen, also known as the Nazir, and he was the student of Rav Kook. And he wrote a very interesting book named Kol HaNevuah, the voice of prophecy, in which he's trying to describe how one can achieve a level of nevuah, a level of prophecy, and what is prophecy, and what is the difference between knowing something by prophecy and knowing something by intellect. So a very interesting book, a very difficult book. And he ends the book speaking about Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And what does he say in these ending paragraphs of his book? He says, "Shalosh tnuot שהיו בעם ישראל בתקופה האחרונה." So he says there were 3 great movements in the Jewish people in the recent times. So 3 very important movements in recent times. When he speaks about recent times, he writes that in the beginning of the 20th century, so he means in the 19th century. 3 important movements. One is תנועת החסידות, מיסודו של רבי ישראל בעל שם טוב. So the first is חסידות, Chassidism. The second is תנועת המוסר, that is the Musar movement. Again, אם ירצה השם, one day we would learn about Rabbi Israel Salanter and his Musar movement. Musar means morals, ethics, piety. So that's the Musar movement of Rabbi Israel Salant. And the third one is תנועת ההשכלה, the Enlightenment movement. And these 3 were enemies. The Maskilim were against the Musarnikim, the Litvacks. Right? The Musarnikim are Litvacks, basically. And the Litvacks were against the Chassidim. And everyone was against the Zionists, the Enlightened, right? The Haskala. So they were all enemies. Nonetheless, all 3 see Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, as a fundamental figure. כולם שמו להם בראשם את רבי משה חיים לוצאטו. The Chassidim, תנועת החסידות, אמצה לה, adapted את ספר כלך פתחי חוכמה. So the book that Ramchal wrote named כלך, כלך is 138, קוף למד חט, כלך. So כלך פתחי חוכמה, openings of wisdom. This is a book in which he is trying to give a concise introduction to the Kabbalah of the Arizal. So it's a very Kabbalistic book, an introduction to Kabbalah. תנועת המוסר בחוגי הישיבות, בראשה ספר מסילת ישרים, The Path of the Just, is a very famous book that is learned everywhere in the Litvack world, in the Litvish world. And the Haskala, the Enlightenment movement, they took the screenplays, because Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto also wrote beautiful Hebrew screenplays. So he was considered by none other than Nachman Chaim Bialik, right? Not a usual guest in our shiurim. So, and he wrote a whole article about the Ramchal that was named Habachur Mipadova. So that's a game of words, because Habachur means the young man, but it can also mean the chosen one. Habachur, that the one that was chosen. So Habachur Mipadova, and which he says that if one day we would build the hall of fame of the new revival of Jewish poetry and literature, Ramchal would be near the mezuzah, he says. So everyone coming in or out would put his hand and kiss him. So that's a beautiful metaphor used by none other than Chaim Luzzatto. You cannot say he doesn't understand. In new Jewish literature, he says he was the first one to write screenplays in modern Hebrew. So for hundreds of thousands of years, no one wrote literature. Rabbinic literature for sure, but literature for the sake of literature was not written for hundreds of years till Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto appears on stage. So you see here, yeah, exactly, pun intended. So you see that all three movements put Ramchal as their figurehead. That's so interesting. So you see from here the prominent, but not only the prominency, but also the range that this man was able to speak to. Because you can just try to imagine who figure nowadays would be seen by the right, the left, by the Haredim, and the atheists as someone that they look up to. Can we identify even one man? Maybe the late Rabbi Sachs. I think maybe you can see him as someone that was able to speak, but not in Hebrew. Not in Hebrew. And he was able to speak in Hebrew, but it was not like his English. But Ramchal's Hebrew is just beautiful. You can read his books, and they are written in a golden language. It's easy to read even today. It's easy to read. Very beautiful, concise language. Now, so who was this man who left such a great impression, such a great mark on Jewish modern history? So the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, obviously was not born as Ramchal, he was born as Moshe Chaim. So Moshe Chaim was born in 1707 in Padova, Italy. Now in Padova there was a big Jewish community with little real original Italian Jewish community and a majority of Jews that came either from Germany, from what we would call Ashkenaz, and they ran away from Ashkenaz because they were persecuted again and again and again through history. So many of them ended up in Italy. By the way, that's very interesting. We cannot speak about that for long because Ramchal himself takes, we need all of our time for him. But just to understand, it's so interesting. Italy was controlled either by the Pope directly or by very, very Christian folks. Nonetheless, it seems that in Italy they were more interested in money or in culture. So they were willing to look aside as long as the Jews were paying their money. And in Germany, many times, they were so firm in their Christianity that they would prosecute the Jews, whatever they were, there was a benefit in having them. So that's just an interesting quirk of history. Be it as it may, in Padova there was a big Jewish community, as I said, from some Portuguese Jews, not many, but some Portuguese, what we'd call the crypto Jews that were able to run away from Spain and ended up in Italy. There were a lot of Ashkenazic Jews, and there were some original Italian Jews. Also, it is very important, in Padova there was one of the only universities in all of Europe that was willing to accept Jews. Don't worry, there were quotes, there were special taxes to be paid, there were special duties, but you were able to finish your learning. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a real Jew. Right? So in Padova, Italy, many Jews came there in order to attain university, and as it happens many times, people come to study, and then they find a girl, and they stay, and that's how the community grew. Okay, so he was a son to a very famous family, the Luzatto family. We have other people from the Luzatto family you may know. For example, Shaddal, Rabbi Shmuel David Luzzatto, about 100 years after Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, is not a direct son of him, but he is also from the same family. He was a very known commentator on the Torah. maybe some of you are familiar with one of the new Israeli poets named Rachel Morfergo. So she's okay. She's in Israel. I don't know. I don't think that she's a trademark name, but people that know literature usually does know the name. She's from the same. She's from the same family. So it's a very well-known family. The origin of Luzzatto, it sounds very Italian, this name, right? Luzzato, but really it's from a city in Germany, named Luzzatto. I'm sorry, I had it here written somewhere. Skip my memory. But so the origin is from Germany. So they are Ashkenazic Jews, basically. But when Ramchal is being born, they are already at least 200 years in Italy, and they look very Italian. What does it mean to look very Italian as a Jew? You dress up as a Renaissance man. You do not dress in the traditional Jewish clothes. You shave your beard, which again is a scandal. If you go to Ashkenaz, that's something that cannot be had. But in Italy, even the rabbis were walking shaven, and that was considered very well. And you are open to a degree to general culture. Again, something that in Ashkenaz can get you excommunicated. But in Padova, you come to learn in the university. So you are open to general culture. We cannot prove it, but from the screenplays the Ramchal wrote, he at least read some of the Italian screenplays of the time, and maybe even visited the theater. We have no proofs here or there, but it very well may be. We also know he knew Latin, which is not a surprise because he himself also attended university, and back then to attend university meant usually that you're supposed to learn a foreign language, and a foreign language is Latin. So they learned Latin. So we know because he from time to time is using his knowledge of Latin. So that's the background. The cultural background is being born into, very different from the cultural background either in Ashkenaz or in Morocco. We spoke last week about Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, no Latin for him. Right? It's a very different cultural background. So it's important to understand where he's coming from. So he's being born. His first teacher was the local rabbi. The local rabbi in Padova was Rav Yitzchak Chaim Cantarini, which seems to be somehow diverted from a cantor. So it was a chazan. Small. Yeah, a small chazan. I cannot attest to his skills in chazan. Okay. And what he was an expert in was in Hebrew. So Hebrew grammar, Hebrew language, writing skillfully and beautifully in Hebrew, writing poems in Hebrew. Here we mean religious poems, like Tehillim, Psalms, to the effect that he was the great teacher of Ramchal in the Hebrew language, and that became an interest for the Ramchal that he never left. As a matter of fact, his first book, which he published in the age of 17, I won't ask you where you have been in the age of 17, but he wrote this book. And the book is named Leshon Limudim, Leshon, a tang, a regular tang or a learned tang. And what he means is he's going to write to you how you should, that's the art of rhetoric, basically, and of poetry. So how do you write poems? How do you write screenplays? How do you speak in public? Wow. It's very interesting. And he's using examples from the Tanakh. So he says, look at the speech David gave to the people. Look at the speech Shmuel gave to the people. See what devices he was using. So it's an amazing, very interesting sefer. And again, that's something new. Who thought about writing such a thing for thousands of years? But he's very much interested in that. So that's and that came from this Rav Yitzchak Chaim Cantarini. He also wrote, the Ramchal wrote, again as a teenager, 150 psalms, Tehillim, for the event of the dedication of new arks, new Aronot Kodesh in the Padova Shul. You can go and see the specific Aron Kodesh. It is now in Eichal Shlomo in Yerushalayim. They brought, that's the Aron Kodesh from Padova, Italy. It's a beautiful, in Italy they were making, I think, the most beautiful Aronot Kodesh in the whole world. Now, if I may, it's a personal taste, obviously, but it's correct. So you'd go there and you can see, it's a beautiful, beautiful Aronot Kodesh. So he wrote these 150 psalms. We have some of them survived, and they are, meaning if you are experts in Tehillim, if you say Tehillim every day, then you know it's not from the Tehillim. But if you are not such an expert in Tehillim, it's an interesting game to play. If I give you 3 psalms, 2 from the real Tehillim of David HaMelech and 1 from the Ramchal, could you identify which is which? And again, in the age of 16 or 15, to write in such a mastery that you are able to copy, to imitate, right, to mimic the style and the wording and the language of Tehillim, that's obviously a great achievement. Unfortunately, this achievement would come back and haunt him later in his as life of his life would continue, as you would see Bezrat Hashem in a few minutes. Okay. Now, at the age of 9, the child is obviously a prodigy, right? That's very clear. He's a genius. Otherwise, we would not speak about him. So he's a genius. He knows everything. He knows everything by heart. He's learning a storm. He's fine, good. So they all understand that Rabbi Cantarini, with his greatness, is not enough. We need someone who is a real Gadol Hador. Fortunately, such a rabbi came to the city, came to Padova. His name was Rabbi Yeshayahu Bassan. Is known as the Mahari Bassan. He wrote a very important responsa, and he's a very important man, both in Halacha and in Kabbalah. And he becomes the prime teacher of the Ramchal for the next 6 years, and then becomes his mentor for more or less the rest of his life. We would say that would not be an easy task. At the age of 16, both teachers leave the scene. Rav Cantarini is older and he passes away. And the Mahari Bassan is leaving Padova. And after both leave, then Ramchal, who is a young guy, 16 years old, he remains alone, and there is no rabbi in Padova that really can teach him now. He can teach the rabbi. Now, that is a dangerous situation because we have a very young man, 16 years old, obviously not married. I mean, it's Italy. In Ashkenaz, he may have been married with 3 children. But in Italy, he is not married. And he obviously wants to advance in his Torah and his learning, and he's also very spiritual. He learned Kabbalah with Mahari Bassan. He's extremely spiritual, and he wants to advance. Now, the Mahari Bassan himself, in a later, I'm sorry that I am always referring to some later great dramatic event, but wait, this dramatic event would come. In this later dramatic event, Rav Bassan would write a letter describing the how it was to teach the Ramchal. It's in source bet in front of you. Look we would skip immediately to the 3rd paragraph here. Uveyoto meir uva baboker baboker. You see that? Okay, so he would wake up early in the morning and he would light the sun. So instead of the sun shedding light on him, he would be meir. He would be putting the light into the world. Kal ke'echad hatzvaim. So his light is one of the deers. Is askan bedivrei Elokim Chaim. So he is busy, engaged in the words of the living God. Ki misheshet kol kelai. It seems that Mahari Bassan refers to that Ramchal would come very early in the morning to they would learn, there was no yeshiva. So they would learn in the rabbi's house, the rabbi's home. Now, it may be the rabbi was maybe still sleeping, maybe was still davening shachrit. So this young man, this young guy, would come very early and would begin just to go through the library of the Rav. והוא עבר את מיכל, ויקח גם מעץ החיים לרבנו הארי ז"ל. So he found books that maybe were, if it was up to the Mahari Bassan, he would wait a little before we would give him to read them. But as the Ramchal was very bright and very independent throughout all of his life, he didn't wait. He took the books from the shelf and read them by himself. Now, the book was the Etz Chaim, which are the writings of Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital was the student of the Ari Zal, of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the great Kabbalist of the 16th century. And now it's considered a very, very difficult book. I don't have to tell you. It's a very difficult book, very sophisticated, very abstract, written in arcane Aramaic. And this 14 years old guy just, read it like it was a romance. He's just going through from how to say, kricha lekricha, from cover to cover, and he knows it by heart at the age of 15. And רעיונותיו פשטו בעמק הסודים, התעלס באביהם, רבה דודים. So he came to the secret knowledge, and he became a lover of the secret, and you could not take him away. After he read this book, he was hooked. He was hanged. So that's what he's going to be engaged in. Yeah. Okay. So as I said, we have a 16 years old guy engaged very, very deeply in learning the secrets of Kabbalah, not married, shaven, and without a rabbi. Now, what would he do? So first he began to write these books. So books about rhetorics, about logic. So right now he still is not going deeper into Kabbalah in his writings. He is still learning. But already it is clear that he has a very skillful ability to write and to explain and to elucidate himself. Now he's arranging around himself a society, a club of guys, and I'm sorry, only male guys, students from the University of Padova. So they come from everywhere in the world, and they learn whatever they learn in the university. He also enlisted to the university. We know that from the records of the Padova University. It seems that he never finished his learning, so he was not given the MD, but he attended. We are not sure if he listened to all of the lectures and chose not to pursue the final degree. Thank you. Or maybe he just enrolled in there. That's what I suspect, only in order to collect the Jews that came. That's what. But it's my speculation. Be it as it may, he collected the most bright of the students and arranged this society. They call it Mevakshei Hashem, seekers of God. And it was a very pious and religious society. And in order to be a member of the club, you needed to learn a certain amount of hours a day. You were not allowed to be angry. If you became angry, you would be given one warning. You would be told, give honor, ten kavod le'elokei Israel, give honor to the God of Israel. And if you would continue to be angry, you would be expelled from the society. So a very pious society, a very moralistic, we may say, society, and they sit and they learn mostly Kabbalah. We know, again, an interesting anecdote, and that is that in Padova at the time, there was a problem of Jews going to improper entertainment during the evenings. So you can understand, there were young guys coming to learn in university, and it's Italy, so good life. And the community didn't like that, as you can imagine. So they made a takana that all young guys must show up to the shul in Padova at 8 o'clock for Ma'ariv and stay to learn until 10, and you're not allowed to leave before. So I would like to not have such a kind here. Anyway, life has changed.
I think 10 o'clock just starts the night.
Just start the 9. Oh, you have to remember there was no electricity back then, so I guess the candles were gone out. Now there was an official exempt from this duty to the society, to the club of the Ramchal, because they knew that these guys are engaged in relearning, they're not going outside and hanging, so they were allowed to study by the house of the Ramchal and not show up in the shul. Okay, beautiful. So that went up for 3 to 4 years. And then when Ramchal was 20 years old, happened an event that changed his life. And that is described again in a letter from the letter dramatic event, another letter. You can see it here in source Gimel. That's a letter written by the Ramchal himself. ביום ראש חודש סיוון, התפ"ז, תפ"ז, it's 1727. 1727, so he's exactly 20. בהיותי מייחד איחוד אחד. So he sits and he's making איחודים. איחוד is a technical term in the Kabbalah of the Ari, in which you are connecting elements that were separated. I apologize, I cannot explain more because I'm an ignorant in Kabbalah. But basically that's what you do. You are you're correcting the word. The word suffers from the separation between the Shechina and the world. That's part of the exile that we are in. So it's not only a galut of Am Israel from the land, it's also a galut of the Shechina from the world. The Shechina does not appear. We drink coffee and we do not feel that God gave us the coffee. So we try to reconnect by saying שהכל נהיה בדברו, by saying בורא נפשות רבות. So we are trying to reconnect God into this world. It's the very, very basic idea of tikkunim and ichudim. Now he is engaged in something much, much, much more deeper and more sophisticated, because you know the different appearances of God and the different appearances in this world. So he's able to connect very fine elements that are much beyond at least my understanding. So he's sitting there and he's doing like that, and he's being meyached ichudim, and he falls asleep. Happens. He falls asleep. Nirdamti. Uvehakitzi, and then I woke up and I heard a voice. And the voice said, Legala nechitna razin tamirin de malka kadisha. I came down here to reveal to you the hidden secrets of the divine king, of the holy king. That's the voice that he hears. Me'at amadeti marit, says I was shaking for a few minutes. Ve'achar nitchazakti, then I put myself up, והכל לא פסק, and the voice continued to speak, ואמר סוד מה שאמר, and he revealed a certain secret. He does not write to us the secret. ביום השני בשעה ההיא, I waited for the second day, and I waited for the same hour, השתדלתי להיות לבדי בחדר, I made sure that there is no one around, וחזר הכל, the voice came back, and said another secret, עד שאחר כך ביום אחד, גילה לי שהוא מגיד שלוח מהשמיים. And then one day, he revealed to me this voice, that he is a teacher, a magid, that was sent from heaven, מסר לי ייחודים פרטיים לכוון בכל יום, ואז יבוא. And then he gave me the key, what ייחוד I need to do in order to bring him. So instead of trying to connect to the hour, now he gave me the modem, right, in which I can dial to heaven. I don't have to just stand and hope. ואני לא רואה אותו. Now he says, I cannot see him, אלא שומע קולו מדבר מתוך פי. His voice speaks from my throat. ואחר כך נתן לי רשות לשאול גם כן. Then he gave me a permission to speak. Up till now, it was only the voice was speaking, but Ramchal was not allowed to speak back. Now he has the permission to ask questions. ואחר כך כ3 חודשים, so that went on for 3 months, and then נתן לי תיקונים פרטיים לעשות בכל יום. He gave me special תיקונים, כדי שאזכה לגילוי אליהו. So now the voice says, it's not only me, there is also אליהו הנביא. ואז ציווה לי לחבר ספר על קהלת. And then he commanded me to produce a book, to write a book on קהלת, שהוא היה מפרש לי הסוד של הפסוקים כל אחד. And so he wrote a sefer that looked very much like the Zohar, but while the Zohar is written on the Torah, he wrote Zohar, a new Zohar, on קהלת. ואחר כך בא אליהו, ואמר סודות מה שאמר, והוא אמר שאתה יבוא מטטרון, it's the name of one of the most important angels, שר הרבה, the great minister, ובבואו, when this angel came, ידעתי שהוא, מפני דברי אליהו שאמר לי, ומאז ועלה הכרתים, כל אחד בפני עצמו. From this day on, I was able to recognize which one of these spiritual entities come to me. גם יש נשמות מתגלות, it says sometimes I am being visited by נשמות, souls, and I do not know their names. ובכותבי החידושים אשר אומרים, אכתוב היום האחד אותו. and then I just write down what they tell me. וכל הדברים האלו בנופלי על פניי אני עושה. So I cannot stand or sit and look. I put my hand, נפיל את אפיים. I put my face on my hand, and then I have these visitations. ורואה את הנשמות האלה הקדושות כמתוך חלום. I can imagine these holy נשמות ממש בצורת אדם. And they're in the figure of man. Now, if someone would come here and tell me that that's what he sees and that's what he hears, I will be very much worried. And as you would see, many people were worried about what was this. And he's 20 years old. He's 20, it's not a rabbi in the age of 70, well-known, famous. He's a good, bright guy. He's heading this society of young students. But is that someone that the greatest angel and Eliyahu and the Shamot would reveal themselves, and you'd write a new Zohar? Writing a new Zohar puts you in one line with none other than Rashbi himself, right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
So he told people about his vision?
That's the most important question. That's the most important. So in the beginning, he doesn't tell anyone, but he has no rabbi. He needs to share it with someone. He shares it with his group of students, right? And they begin to learn together what the Magid tells him. So he shares it with them. He shares what he writes, and they describe, maybe we'll read some descriptions later, they describe, not he, the students describe how he would fall on his hand, just as he is describing here, and then half an hour would be sitting like that, you would see him as sleeping, and then he would wake up and begin to write extremely, extremely fast, as someone trying to write what was dictated to him. And you would write in language, in Aramaic, in languages that are not spoken, that usually it's extremely difficult to write in such a language so quick. So it's like, not as he's writing it from himself, but hearing a voice and just writing what is being told. So these are very special, obviously, these are very special stories, right? But that's what they describe. I mean, these are historical documents. This is what's being described.
And these students prove it, you know.
Yeah, we have some of the books. We speak. Unfortunately, the fate of these books were not was not to the good, as we would describe in a few minutes. Excuse me. Okay. Now, one of the students in the society was a young guy. All of them were young, but very young guy named Yekutiel, or Yekutiel, we would say today. And this Yekutiel came from Poland. His name was Yekutiel Gordon. Yekutiel Leib Gordon. He came from Poland, and he was so engaged and infatuated. What is the word? Infatuated with this young new rabbi who has revelations and writes the Zohar from a stretch. And so he wrote back home. Speaking, exactly. But he was a young guy. Can you blame him? He was excited. He was excited. He wanted to share his excitement. So he's writing it back home. It seems that he also hoped that he would get some donations by describing the Holy Society. For sure, there would be some important people that would want to help these people and support them. So he's writing back home. And as you can imagine, in Ashkenaz, in Sfad, there was some phenomena of Magidim, of people hearing from angels. It was not something that was completely foreign. For 20 years old, it was. But it was not completely out of context. In Ashkenaz, the Maharam Rotenburg never said that he had Magidim. Right? Rabbeinu Tam never said that he had Magidim. Rashi never said, you are better than all of the early Ashkenazic rabbis. What is going on here? And they begin to check, and there is a certain rabbi. His name is Rabbi Moshe Chagiz. Now, Rabbi Moshe Chagiz is the son of a rabbi we spoke about in the summer named Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz. And his father was one of the greatest warriors against Shabtai Tzvi and Sabteanism. You can see where it's going. You can see where it's heading. Now, the son inherited from his father the combativeness, against Sabtainism, against anything that even a smell of Sabtainism is coming out of. And he says, just a second, there is a guy here, 20 years old, very young, he has no rabbi, and he's just beginning to say that he has revelations, and he's writing new books and new Zohar. Something here smells to me, smacks, as a new Messiah is trying to show up. So Rabbi Moshe Chaim begins to write to the rabbis in Padova, saying, you must stop this young man. Now the rabbis in Padova knew the Ramchal and knew his family, and they were not quick to react. Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz was not someone to wait. So he said, if you are not acting, I would go to the higher authority. So here begin to write to the rabbis in Venice, Venice. Now you would say, what is the connection the rabbi in Venice and the rabbi in Padova? You have to understand that back then, Venice was not just a city which is falling down into the water. Back then, Venice was it was not the great empire that it was in the 16th or the 17th century, but it was still a very important city in Italy. There was no Italy. It was a very important state in the area of Italy, and the rabbis there they were still seeing themselves as the chief rabbis of all of the Italy area. So he began to write to them, there is a man in Padova that declares himself that he is, it seems that in the letter that was hanging around, it may be that this Yekutiel Gordon also wrote some things in order to enhance. So that we are not sure exactly. Yeah, we're not sure exactly. But he may be the Messiah. He says it may be the Messiah, and he says that his neshama is an incarnation of Rabbi Akiva and maybe of Moshe Rabbeinu. So again, it is difficult to distinguish between what was really said by the Ramchal and what was this Rabbi Yekutiel just writing in order to get maybe more support. And Rabbi Moshe Chaim obviously take everything in face value. And he writes to the rabbis in Venice, you must stop the man. Now, the rabbis in Venice, they do act, maybe also because they feel complimented that they are being called to act and here they are considered as the chief rabbis of Italy, right? So we should act. And they begin to write letters to the rabbis of Padova, and they corner them into making an interrogation. Inquisition, we may almost say, into Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And then all the letters that we were quoting up till now begin to be written. They ask the Mari Basin. You remember, the rabbi of the Ramchal is not in the scene anymore, but they begin to ask him, how was Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto when he was young? He was an excellent guy. He is fine. Did he claim that he has revelations? No. Okay, so they renew the connection. The Mari Basan begins to write to his student and saying, what is going on? And it's very interesting. It seems that the Ramchal didn't really want to discover everything. So he writes some, he hides some. The end, I don't want to go into everything. Suffice to say that Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz was extremely keen on extinguishing any remnant of the Sabbatean movement, regardless if there was a real Sabbatean movement or not. Now, there were some. He was fighting some real enemy. But I guess that McCarthy also found some real Soviet spies, right? Because if you crush everyone, some of them would be Soviets, and some of them were Sabbateans. But here, obviously, he was in the wrong alley. But he didn't let go, and because he was an important rabbi, he was able to convince some other rabbis, and Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto was made to swear that he would not write any more writings of revelation, of Magid nature, and more than that, everything that he wrote, that was up to thousands of pages, he would put to Gniza. So they put it in an iron closet. They locked it. The key was given to the rabbis of Padova, not to the Ramchal himself. And they said, if in some older age it would be revealed that you are the real thing, then we would open up your early writings. But as for now, they are forbidden to you. You can just imagine what a sorrow it was for him, that the things that he was told to write by the Maggid, and now were taken from him. And he writes very bitterly, now he was a man of peace. He never, even when they were saying horrible things about him. They said, for example, that he wrote the 150 Psalms, you remember, for the dedication of the Aaron. So they said he wrote it because he wanted to replace David HaMelech. So there were extremely awful things written about really a young man. And how can he say that he has revelations? He's not married yet. A non-married man he doesn't have a beard. Someone without a beard having a revelation. So again, for us, sometimes it looks somewhat superficial, but it seems that for the rabbis there, it seemed as a very, very valid points. So, and also, I think they wanted to have Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz off their back. I mean, I apologize, I'm saying that, but I think it was, but he was very insistent, and you didn't want to go against him because he was married to many important rabbis, and if you would give a name that your community is welcoming, right, for Sabbatianism, you would be in very big troubles. So in the end, so they try to quiet it down, right? So if lock down the material, stop writing new things. If you want to speak in your own home, we will not intervene, but please stop making a noise. And the Ramchal agreed. He took the oath, and he got married with a woman named Tzipora, which also raised some eyebrows, right? Because if he is claiming that he is some inclination of Moshe Rabbeinu,
oh no,
right? And in the Ketubah that he wrote her, there were some very clear Kabbalistic writings, very, for me, unreadable, but obviously for people that understand Kabbalah, he was trying to say something also in the Ketubah. But he's keeping quiet for 3 years. And it seems that maybe we can just wait it out, and he would become old enough and important enough, and then he can publish whatever he wants. But that was not to be. At the age of 23, he decides that he wants to publish a book about the authenticity of the original Zohar. That's all. So there is a whole controversy in Italy about the authenticity of the Zohar. Some rabbis claimed that it was not really from Rashbi. The majority opinion was that the Zohar is maybe edited, but the kernel is from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto wants to argue for that position. Up to now, so no Magid, no nothing, very clear technical book. Beautiful. He sends the book to his former rabbi, the Mariba son, to get his approval that he's allowed to publish the book, and the Mariba son says, yes, you're allowed to publish the book. Excellent. So he needs to go to Amsterdam, where the publishing house is, and to publish the book. Fine. It seems that Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz never lifted his eyes from the Ramchal, even after the oath, because he wanted him to be completely excommunicated. And he suspected that the Ramchal would try to do something when the mess would come down. So in the minute that he hears, and I am sure he had informants in Padova, it's clear to me, because in the minute that he hears that the Ramchal has left Padova for Amsterdam, he is sure that the reason why he's leaving is in order to publish all of his writings, not only the book that got Haskama, but everything in Amsterdam. So in Amsterdam, Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz didn't have such a strong power because Amsterdam was as of now, very liberal community. So he knew that he needs to stop him before. He sends, it's an amazing story. He sends messages to a certain rabbi in Frankfurt, because from Italy to Amsterdam, back then, you were going through Frankfurt. So he sent missionaries to Frankfurt, to the local rabbi, telling him, listen, some rabbi is going to pass through, and he would say that he's going to Amsterdam and he has books. Stop him immediately. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happens. So the Rav in Frankfurt, and obviously Ramchal suspects nothing. Throughout everything, he's seen as in the end, he's a very naive and peaceful man. And he's coming to Frankfurt, and as is the custom, he's coming to the local city, so he's meeting when the Rav passes through the city, he meets the local rabbi in order to respect him. So he goes to the rabbi. As he enters the house, the servant locks the door behind him. They sit him down. Now he understands it's in a trap, but that's, it's too late. Where are you going? To publish a book in Amsterdam. You are not allowed to publish your book in Amsterdam. What do you mean? You have gone against your oath. You need now to sign a second oath, not only saying that you would not publish anything from a Maggid. You would not publish anything about the Zohar whatsoever up till you'd be in Eretz Israel. If you're in Eretz Israel, they say, then maybe the purification of Eretz Israel would help you, but not in Chutz La'aretz, so you're not allowed. And more than that, which is really heartbreaking, they ordered the iron chest, right, with all the writings, to be sent from Padova. They didn't want to burn it because they were worried that if it's really holy, they are not allowed to burn it. They buried it near the river in Frankfurt. Why near the river? So the mold would destroy it. And to our knowledge, to this day, this iron, I don't know if anything remained inside the chest, but it was never recovered. So they buried it on the banks of the what river in the Main River. Thank you. So they buried on the bank of the Main River, and we have the letters of from. It's a very, very sad story. It's a very sad story. It's I think he wrote what books were. So it's about 10 or 12 books, Sefarim, full. As I said, some of them 700 pages, folio pages, 1,000. No, it's masterpieces that were lost because of the fear. We can understand also the second side. I can understand Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz and his group, but history has made his judgment, and it's in favor of Ramchal. Only after that, Ramchal is allowed to get out of the rabbi's house and to continue his journey to Amsterdam, and he continued. He travels to Amsterdam. He does not return to Padova. That was enough for him from the Italian rabbis. He's going to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, he established a yeshiva. He began to teach there. He had a son born. And as I said, Amsterdam was more of a liberal community. Liberal. We should be everything with its own context in history. So. They still excommunicated Spinoza, right? And they caused Ariel de la Costa to commit a suicide. So it's not that it's you can say whatever you want, but it's much freer. And someone like the Ramchal can easily take a proper place there. So he sits there for a few years, but he decides that he doesn't want to stay in Amsterdam, although it was a very good period for him. He printed two very important books. One is the Mesilat Yesharim, and the other is Derech Hashem. What is so special in these two books is that these two books are fully Kabbalistics, but written in a language of philosophy. And if you are not a Kabbalist yourself, you would never identify that the origins of these books are in Kabbalistic form. So he was able to translate all of the terms, all of the concepts, all of the ideas. So nowadays you can read the Mesilat Yesharim, the Path of the Just, which, by the way, is a highly recommended reading, and not in Hebrew. It was translated to English, I think, more than once. A very accessible reading, at least the first, let's say, 10 chapters or 11 chapters. And you would never know that there is anything Kabbalistic in it. But the whole thing is a blueprint how to reach prophecy by refining yourself, and by making yourself holier, and by fixing, repairing, correcting your attitudes, your personality, your traits, your mitzvot, your ben adam lechaver, or your ben adam lamakom. A beautiful, beautiful book. And as we said in the beginning, to this day, it's considered one of the most fundamental books in the Litvish world. The Gaon of Vilna that he didn't ever meet the Ramchal. He was younger, I think 18 years younger than the Ramchal. And he said that if he would have known about the book, he would have walked in by foot to Amsterdam to meet the Ramchal and to buy the book directly from him. As there is a tradition from him that he said that the Mesilat Yesharim is such a holy book. In the first 11 chapters, there is not even one word out of place, which seems to hint that there is one word out of place afterwards. And there is a whole sport by rabbis, by people of research to find what was the Gra hinting when he said there's one word out of place. I myself had two different ideas. I have no idea. And so I'm not even going to repeat things that I think are pure speculation, or not my speculations. So very, very high valued. The second book, the Derech Hashem, is an attempt by the Ramchal to explain the Kabbalah in the most simplistic terms. So everyone would be able to understand how does God operate in the world, how was the world created, how it's being observed, and how does God manipulate, we may say, the world one way or the other. Extremely accessible. Short sentences, short paragraphs. He was the master. I heard one rabbi when I prepared this shiur, and I heard other shiurim that given on the Ramchal. One rabbi said, I think it was very, very to the mark. He said that what the Rambam was for halacha, Ramchal was for Kabbalah. So the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, he took the Gemara, which is highly inaccessible to the masses, and make it in very short, concise paragraphs. That's the Mishnah Torah. The same thing was done by the Ramchal to Kabbalah. I think it's a very accurate description, and again, a highly recommended sefer, the Derech Hashem. I don't know if that was translated. I'm not sure. It was. It is amazing the amount of work that goes into the Ramchal to this very day. There is a whole community named the Ramchal community. They have a beautiful internet site, which I use some of the resources, and some of the books here are by them. So it's the Machon Ramchal, the Ramchal Institute. So there is a Ramchal institution.
In Israel?
In Israel, yeah, in Yerushalayim. They also published oral, that's a biography of the Ramchal. Beautiful biography.
Can you send this to the
group? Yeah, I will send, Bezrat Hashem. I will send the links. So he writes all of that. In that sense, you may say that the war against him helped him. It caused him to stop writing in Kabbalistic language and begin to write in human language, right? Which was, to us, it's a great benefit. It's a great benefit. But he wanted to come to Eretz Israel. We don't know why. There are two ways to see it. Some say that it's because he was Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz, as you can understand, he would not be quieted. All right, so he tried to harm him even in Amsterdam, and he wanted to run away from there. So that's one possible explanation. I do think, and again, it's a pure speculation. I think that it has to do with the first oath he took, in which he said that he would only return to write in the Zohar language in Eretz Israel, because there the Kabbalah is better, the mystical ideas are better. I think that's, but again, it's a speculation. Be it as it may, in 1742, he comes to Akko. Now, that's an interesting choice to be in Akko, because the known cities for Kabbalah are Yerushalayim, Tveria, or Tzfat, not Akko. I guess that he didn't want to be with the other Kabbalists, right? Either because he didn't want to overshadow them. He was still a very young man. We speak about the man in his 30s, but with Magidim. So either he didn't want to overshadow them, or that he didn't want them to interfere. He had enough. He wanted to sit alone somewhere, have his Talmidim, and write. Unfortunately, he was only able to do so for about a year and a half. After a year and a half, a plague. It seems that it was of a smallpox. We are not sure, either cholera or smallpox. Hit Akko, right? This is the name, cholera. How do you say cholera? Smallpox. Yeah. So hit Akko, and him and his wife and their only infant son died in the plague. According to some traditions, he was buried in Tveria near Rabbi Akiva, and that plays with the with the myth, I would say, that is an inclination, maybe he said it, maybe not, there's an inclination of Rabbi Akiva. Some say, and that's interesting to think about, he lived to the age of 40. Rabbi Akiva began to learn Torah from the age of 40 and on. So if it's an inclination of Rabbi Akiva, that's like a correction of the first 40 years. So his kever, there is one kever of him near, as I said, near Rabbi Akiva. There is another kever, as things happen, there is another kever in Kfar Yasif, near Akko, where the Jews of Akko were usually burying their deads. And a few years ago, there was a big gravestone that was exposed there, and they say it's his gravestone, and they are able to identify his and his wife and his son. I mean, that's I think the jury is still on about that. So it seems to me that the historians are more now to the opinion that it's the graves in Kfar Yasif, but this guy, which is extremely serious, he says that he checked it. I didn't go into all of the books. I'm not an historian, so I can only quote what I see. And he says it is the kever in Tiberia. So you should be lechumra in both places. But regardless where he's buried, his tradition is he lives not in where he's buried. He lives in the books, in the writings, in his legacy. To a great extent, we may almost say that his influence on Jewish thought, what we call today simple orthodoxy, the thought why the world was created, how it is being managed by God, I don't know, 90% is Ramchal. Highly influential, highly influential on the Jewish world of today. Meaning, there is much more Ramchal than Rambam. I can say that. So our thought, I don't know what is our, but the simple tenets of orthodoxy, right, which is being taught in school, let's say, are much closer to the Ramchal than to the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide of the Perplexed of the Rambam. So that's a statement that we just made. So that's about thought, and we spoke about him being part, or maybe even the foundation of the revival of the new modern Hebrew literature. I mean, he wrote books. I read the book because I was interested as a rabbi what he has to tell me about the art of rhetoric. Extremely interesting. That's why I began to buy these books. But you have to understand, when you order one book from the Ramchal Institute, you cannot just order one book. You're already making a delivery. Yeah, it's a waste. Anyhow. It's again, I know that every shiur we end by saying that you must read the work of your Chaim. No, you must read. So there is a reading list, but you really must read the Mesilat Yesharim. Yeah, there is. I think even free on the internet. The Mesilat Yesharim, the Path of the Just. Wonderful book. That's a book that is being learned by both guys in the age of 13 here on Wednesday night, and people at the age of 70 writes commentary on this book. So again, multi-layered and multifaceted. It's amazing works, amazing works. And zchuto yagin aleinu, as we understood, that's a man that was hunted, was persecuted, was expelled from one place to the other. Nonetheless, he bare no hatred. You would not find anywhere in his writings anything against anyone, just sweet and peaceful and trying to bring light and good to the world. And I think that's, even in itself, that's a great lesson that we can learn from him. Thank you so much for coming, and we see you Be'ezrat Hashem next week.
Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. There would be no shiur next week. I am in Miluim. I am in Miluim, so I apologize. I'm denying that, but I have to accept. So next week I'll be in Se'elim, and I'll meet you Be'ezrat Hashem the week after.
Thank you very much. Go to my cousins to hear you. Yes.